Lunch.
You are looking live.
Live at lunch. Live at lunch with Ott and Hanny on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
What the hell's going on out here?
Now, here's Jimmy Ott and Charles Hannegriff.
For some reason or another, you sound a little taller on radio.
Is it live? Is it live? Is it live?
From Walk-Ons in Brewley, welcome to the Monday edition of Live at Lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Charles Hannegriff along with Max Gocho. Jimmy Ott is not with us today. Troy Macker will be with us at the bottom of the hour from Bet Rivers. We'll go over what happened over the weekend. It was quite a lot in the NFL, college basketball. We had, of course, the wrapping up of a little bit of the bowl season, not counting the remainder of the playoffs. So we got a little bit of everything to get to today. Max, how are you?
Good morning. How's it going?
Better than if I were the Vikings last night. That didn't quite work out. Black Monday in the NFL, the carnage not quite as bad maybe as it could have been. We'll get to all of that in a second, but I want to open with the Saints and the final game of what has been a miserable season. 5-12. The Saints fall yesterday 27-19 to the Bucs. I've got a lot that I want to say about the future of the organization and where they are and how important this next period of time is, not only for the Saints but for the Pelicans and for Gail Benson, for the entire hierarchy in that building. But yesterday was the final. You had to get through the rest of this season. Darren Rizzi did what he could. They won a couple of games here. Mostly what Rizzi did was he kept this group playing hard. He kept them engaged, with the exception of that Monday night in Green Bay where they were completely overwhelmed. The Saints could have come out yesterday and had another effort like that. They didn't. They came out and actually had a 16-6 halftime lead. They came out the opening drive of the game. They looked really, really good. They kept the ball for about half of the first quarter. Tampa, who had everything to play for. I mean, this was an all-or-nothing game for the Bucs. If they win, they're the division champs. They're in the playoffs. If they lose, they're out. And the Saints had nothing to play for. It was one of those deals where it was even unlikely that the Saints could improve upon their draft position with the loss. So they did move up one spot yesterday. They caught a little bit of a break with the strength of schedule tiebreaker. But to see the Saints ahead, going into the fourth quarter was a huge shock at 19-13. Then, of course, order was restored, if you will. Not unlike, in some ways, Max, the first game we saw between these teams. When the Saints came out behind Spencer Rattler, ball of fire, took the lead early, and then saw Tampa come back on them in the second quarter and then completely overwhelmed them in the second half. This one wasn't that bad, but the Bucs made plays when they had to. Mostly Baker Mayfield made plays with his feet when he had to. Some of the biggest conversions that Tampa made, some of the biggest plays that they made was Mayfield on the ground. They also got Mike Evans his necessary yardage for his bonus, although not if you bet him in the props yesterday. I think his total was 90 and he had 89 in some cases.
It was forced anyway. That wasn't a bad beat or anything. They forced it in the last play of the game.
My stance on records, okay, because this is a mark that puts him with Jerry Rice. My stance on records is very clear, and even when this has gone in LSU's favor, I don't like it. Anything you do in a game that is not something that you would normally, and I'm not going to harp on this forever with Mike Evans, whatever. They got into the yards, he got the record, fine. Anything you do in a game that you would not ordinarily do in a game to ensure a record, to me, is in some ways tainted. Okay, I'm sorry. If they come out there and it's any other game, any other situation, they kneel on the ball and they go home. Okay, so is it Brett Favre falling on the ground for Michael Strahan, or the team standing on the side as Nikisha Sales goes in for a layup? No, but is it a little bit manufactured? Yeah, it is.
Can you imagine in this case, 36 seconds left, up 8, if they throw a pick six in that scenario, just trying to get Mike Evans the ball?
Sure.
And with the playoffs on the line.
With the playoffs on the line, you did something that you would not have ordinarily done. And if you do that for a record, I'm sorry. I've just seen too much of this in sports, okay? Jerry Rice didn't have to finagle anything to get the record, okay? This is David Robinson being fed the ball on the last day of the regular season to win the scoring title away from Shaq. When you do this, when you alter your game plan to set a record, to me it's a little bit tainted.
Now, the other side of this is the players were clearly so happy for him. It was a big boost for them. Todd Bowles, and that might help Tampa going forward. I do think this is noticed in free agency at times. If you're in the mix, maybe looking to go somewhere, I think this means something. But, yeah, from a record standpoint, I do think when we look back on Mike Evans' career, it will be hard not to kind of think of this moment.
I don't know. I agree with you on the Todd Bowles part, okay? If your entire locker room wants to do this and you say no, they might go do it anyway. It's happened with the Saints last year. They tried to get Jamal Williams a touchdown at the end of the season. Allen told them no, and they said, yes, we're doing it anyway. So if I'm Bowles, sure, okay. You tell Mayfield you're going to throw this very safe, quick pass, okay, that cannot possibly be intercepted, and we're going to get him the record. Money's different, by the way, than records, okay? These incentives for bonuses, sometimes you may have to look at that. I'm not saying you alter your entire game plan, but you cost a guy some money with something you wouldn't ordinarily do, that'll lose your locker room a lot faster than the record would. And I think Evans is not my favorite player, okay? I do back to his time at A&M, his time with Tampa, his fights with Marshawn Lattimore, some cheap shots that he's taken of you. Not my favorite player, but I respect his game. You can't not. The numbers are too.
He's a Hall of Famer.
He's a Hall of Famer. Okay, the numbers are overwhelming, with or without this last reception yesterday. So let's get to where we talk about Spencer Rattler here a little bit. Rattler, as he has done in a number of games this year, had a very good first half and a very poor second half. In fact, in the 7 games that Rattler has played in, 6 of them starts, he's had a 103.5 passer rating in the first half and a 46.5 passer rating in the second half. Why is that? I don't know that there's any one reason. I can tell you that the Saints trailed in a lot of the second half of these games, and now not this one until the end, but in most of these other second halves they were trailing. It forces you into more desperate positions. It affects your play calling. Your run game is not usually as complimentary when you're behind this way. Some of it may be teams adjusting to Rattler that have seen him for the first time, and some of it may just be a rookie regressing to the mean. I don't think it's any, oh my goodness, Spencer Rattler just goes to pieces in the second half. I think there's factors into why that is. But when they go look at Rattler in the offseason and they decide, hey, this is what we can improve on, you have to look at the splits and say, why did this happen? And like I said, I don't know if you feel differently. I don't know that there's one thing that makes Rattler that much better in the first half or worse in the second half.
Being in a trailing game state certainly affects those situations, right? You're being pressed to do more, and in second halves it becomes more obvious what you have to do. He's 0-6, as a starter now, but that is a little misleading. I mean, his stats are going to be misleading. He had no one to throw to, let's be honest. He was behind a very shaky offensive line. You've seen enough from him to know he's worth keeping around and at least seeing what he's made of. I mean, this is a league that has Tim Boyle, a quarterback from UConn, who had one touchdown.
You've been picking on Tim Boyle all weekend.
1 touchdown, 13 interceptions in college at UConn, not at an SEC school, in college, and he's been a 6-year NFL veteran. So backups in the NFL, there are some bad ones out there, and Spencer Rattler is more than capable. But is he a starter next year? No, he's not.
You get stat of the day with Tim Boyle's college stats.
It amazes me every time I see him on the field. I'm like, how is this guy still in the league? But it's not like he's done anything in the NFL to keep him around.
You really want to get aggravated, look up what he's made in 6 seasons in the NFL for, one more touchdown in college than you or I threw. The thing with Spencer Rattler is you don't have to make a decision on the long-term future of the New Orleans Saints or Spencer Rattler right now. Here's what I would do with Spencer Rattler. And this has nothing to do with who the coach is, doesn't have anything to do with what happens with Derek Carr, doesn't have anything to do with any free agent they might bring in, doesn't have anything to do with any external factor. If I'm having an exit interview with Spencer Rattler, I tell him, look, here's what we want you to do. Get your body right, get some rest, recuperate a little bit, and get into the off-season program. Get in the film room, get in the weight room, get on the practice field, rep the hell out of it. Have a great off-season. When we hire a new coach, come in, meet with him, talk about common goals. Work your behind off, and we'll see you in Metairie for OTAs, okay? We'll see you for minicamp, and we'll certainly see you for next August. I don't have to name Spencer Rattler the starter. I don't have to name him the backup. I don't have to extend his contract. I don't have to do anything with Spencer Rattler. He's under a deal for 3 more years at a very cheap price.
This round pick.
Okay? So if he's the starter, the backup, the third string guy, whatever, I got to make a decision on Derek Carr. I got to make a decision on 3 dozen guys that were on the roster yesterday, more than likely. Rattler's not one of them. I don't have to give him a raise. I certainly don't have to cut him. I don't want to trade him. He might end up being good. So, Spencer, you stay right where you are. Go have a good offseason. Get in the film room. Get in the weight room. Get on the practice field. Improve. Force me to make a decision. You've shown us enough that I want to see some more. Now, do I think he'll ever be a full-time NFL starting quarterback? I do not, okay? But I've been wrong before, okay? When Baker Mayfield left Carolina, I thought he was done. When Sam Darnold left Carolina, I thought he was done. When Jared Goff left Los Angeles, I thought he was done. I'm talking about as a starting quarterback in the league. When I thought Geno Smith was done 3 or 4 different times. And all of those players have turned out to be, anywhere from competent to really good starting quarterbacks. So I don't want to have to make these far-ranging decisions on Spencer Rattler today, nor do I have to. That's the beauty part of all of the things that are facing the Saints this offseason. Spencer Rattler is none of them, okay? There is nothing you need to do with Spencer Rattler other than say, have a great offseason. Have a great OTAs, have a great minicamp, have a great summer, have a great camp, and then we'll see where we are next season. I don't have to decide about him. I got to decide about all kinds of other stuff, and that's what we're going to get to. But the Bucs end up getting the win. The Falcons, who had some life, end up falling to Carolina. So the NFC South once again goes to Tampa. Tampa's a dangerous team. I don't think that they can win 3 games in a row and get to the Super Bowl, but I think on the right day they can win a game. They could pull a big upset. They're capable on the right day. I mean, maybe it's a 20% chance that they would go to a Detroit and win, or a 20% chance that they would go to Philadelphia and win. But it ain't 0, and it ain't like a 2% chance. Mayfield can get hot. Can he get hot for 3 or 4 games in a row and win them the conference or win the Super Bowl? Almost certainly not. But can Baker Mayfield go have one of them? That wasn't his best day yesterday. Kind of bailed him out with his feet a little bit. But could they win a game in the playoffs? Yeah.
I give them a real chance. I mean, I was thinking
a real chance to do what?
To be relevant in the NFC. I think they can make a real run here. This is a team that moves the ball offensively. The defense leaves you a little bit to ask, but they do enough against the run game. They get the Commanders in the first round, wild card round. They're going to be favored in that game, and I thought
they're a home field favorite. They're 3 points.
There was a chance in all this that they were going to be the 4 seed, and they were going to draw maybe the Lions in the first round. And I would have played the Bucs at almost any spread that would have come out because the Lions are hurt defensively. There are a lot of teams that are vulnerable in the NFC, and the Buccaneers, to me, could emerge out of this conference.
the winner of that Tampa-Washington game is going to scare the hell out of whoever they're playing because they've both got quarterbacks that are capable of beating you with a magnificent game in the playoffs. Okay, it's not likely that they're going to be able to do it more than once. And for Jaden Daniels, you're talking about a rookie who's making his first playoff start, and he's got to do it on the road. So that's hard. Okay, we didn't expect the Commanders in the playoffs. At least I didn't. But those two teams have a puncher's chance. We like that term. If Mayfield and Daniels are doing the punching, one day, yeah, they can get there. We're here at Walk-Ons in Bruley. Boy, it's a chilly day here as we got some cold weather coming into the area, so come on in. We are warm here, even though we're on what's considered the front patio area, but we've got the garage doors rolled down here, so it's nice and toasty in here. Come by, get a burger, get a sandwich, get the Walk-Ons menu by now. I like the Cajun press. It's the flatbread, it's the caramelized onions, it's chicken and shrimp, and it's really, really good. It's got the caramelized onions kind of make the sandwich. Lots of big salads too, and if you like beer, and we like beer, right? Over 4 dozen beers on tap here at Walk-Ons in Bruley, and not only do you have your traditional favorites, but about 3 or 4 or 5 of the taps on the end are reserved for seasonal favorites that they will rotate. So you want to come in and try something new? There's always something new here at Walk-Ons in Bruley. We'll take a break, come back here. What's next for the Saints moving forward? We'll do that when we return here live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Live at lunch with Ott and Hanny from Walk-Ons in Bruley on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Remember, you can always get the show on demand, the new LouisianaSports.net, 104.5ESPN.com. We'll be dropping a new Handycast on YouTube tonight. We're going to take a look back at some of the plays from LSU's time in the Texas Bowl with Richard Dixon. All right, so what's next for the Saints? I would argue that these next 4 months are the most important 4 months by a large scale of Gail Benson's time as owner of both the Saints and the Pelicans, more important than any 4-month period that she's had since she assumed control of the team. In the next 4 months, the Saints are going to have to decide on a new head coach, whatever other organizational moves they're going to make, and we're not expecting anything at the top with the general manager or anything like that, but you're going to have to hire a new coach. He's going to have to bring in an entire staff. You're going to have to decide how you're going to run this draft and how you're going to run free agency and how you're going to get yourself out of this salary cap mess. You also have to decide what you're going to do with Derek Carr. And from the Pelicans, you have to decide what you're going to do with Brandon Ingram before the trade deadline in February. Then you're going to have to decide when the season is over, and they're on a 2-game win streak, Max. You're going to have to decide what you're going to do with, in order, the general manager, David Griffin, the head coach, Willie Green, and what you're going to do. You will have a lottery pick, what you're going to do with that in the future of Zion Williamson. So there's like 7 or 8 massive decisions on Gail Benson's desk between now and, say, the end of April. That's why it's the most – I got a column coming out of LouisianaSports.net that's going to kind of go into a little bit of detail on this later in the week. But let's just keep it with the Saints for right now because the Pelicans are a whole different kettle of fish. The first thing, in my opinion, if Mickey Loomis is going to stick around, and by all indications it is, I think it's time for fresh ideas in the front office. I think the way that they have been doing things was – I don't want to say necessary, but at least understandable. When you had a Hall of Fame quarterback, you no longer do. This philosophy of continuing to take contracts and move money into the future and trading away multiple draft picks for one higher pick because you're 1 or 2 players away or you don't need a whole bunch of guys in free agency, that philosophy has to be put away. So I don't know if Loomis is capable or willing to do this, but it's my strong feeling that if you keep upon this road that you're doing, which is you continue to trade draft choices and you continue to move contracts and renegotiate contracts and restructure contracts to just move money into the future, that you will stay on this hamster wheel for forever, unless you fall backwards into some franchise quarterback. So the first thing, if I'm Mickey Loomis, before I even, you're going to get into the head coaching stuff here in a very short period of time, I got to look at what my scouting department is doing. I got to look at why we're doing what we're doing in the draft. The Saints aced the 2017 draft. It was one of the best drafts, not just in franchise history, but in NFL history. You had a tremendous amount of hits in that class. I mean, Trey Hendrickson was a third-round pick, for crying out loud. He led the league in sacks this year. But since 2017, mostly what you've done is you have traded away an abundance of draft choices to move up in the draft. The Saints had no third or fourth round pick in last year's draft. They had no third or fourth round pick in the 22 draft. They had an extra one. They would not have had a first round pick in 2023 had it not been for the compensation in the Sean Payton trade. In 2020, they had no 2 or 4. They had an extra 3. In 2019, they had no 1 or 3. And in 2018, they had no number 2. They did pick up a few extra draft picks with some of these trades, but by and large, in the last 6 years, you are down somewhere between 6 and 9 players that you could have drafted that you didn't draft. How many of those would have hit? I don't know. But the reason that the Saints don't have any depth is this is where you build your team. This is your cheap labor. These third-round picks that become starters, these second-round picks that become second contract guys, these fourth-round picks that are starters, or at least, very valuable on special teams. If you look at this scouting department and say, we're doing everything right, then you've missed the boat. Who have you drafted? Last year you drafted Talise Fuaga, who I think had a fine rookie year, in the first round, and Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round, who may be a player. I like him. After that, I don't know that you have anything else. Maybe Spencer Rattler turns out. I don't know if you have anything else. In 2023, your second-round pick was used on Isaiah Foskey. Your third-round pick was used on Kendre Miller. And your fourth-round picks were used on Nick Saldiveri and Jake Haener. That's a massive miss. That means that you got Brian Brzee, who looks like a good player, a little bit one-dimensional, but at least a good player, and really nothing else out of the 2023 draft. In 2022, you took Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. I'm very concerned about Olave's concussions, but he's been a productive player. Penning, after looking like a disaster, has at least turned into a competent starter. And you got Alontae Taylor, who's run hot and cold. And that's it. Previous year, you drafted Peyton Turner in the first round, who's been a complete bust. Pete Werner's been a decent player. Paulson Adebo, they got to make a call on him, and nothing else. In 2020, you took Cesar Ruiz in the first round. He's on his best day, he's a competent starter in the league. He's certainly not an upper echelon player. And the rest of your draft, you got nothing. Oh, you got Zach Bond. He's a Pro Bowler.
I was just going to say.
In Philadelphia.
You're talking about player evaluation. What about players on your own roster?
Yes.
Letting Bond go. Trey Hendrickson, of course, you see him every week with the Bengals. You've got players that you've had.
The previous year, you got Eric McCoy, who's turned out to be a fantastic player, and you drafted Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who I understand why they moved. He's productive, but he's a headache, and nothing else out of that class. And the year before that was the Marcus Davenport disaster. You traded 2 first-round picks for him. You got very little out of him. Traquan Smith was your second pick in that draft. Rick Leonard, Natrell Jamerson, Kamir, and I don't even remember how to say his name, and Boston Scott. Will Clapp was your 7th-round pick. He was the second-best player you drafted. He might have been the best player you drafted in that draft. This is 6 years' worth of futility, okay? You can't live on the 2017 draft forever. So if Loomis doesn't look at this and say, we need to take a long, hard look at what we're doing in our scouting department, what we're doing in our development of players, then the rest of this is for naught. I mean, I can give you players that they should go after, but if your scouting department is going to have this kind of track record, you got no shot.
And you need like some position group maybe where you've really keyed in on. I mean, like we're looking, the Saints have the 9th pick now in next year's draft, and it's one of those rare positions where you feel like they can pretty much take the best player available because you have needs everywhere.
You do.
You have needs at every position, so there's no reason to key in on one offensive lineman or a cornerback, a pass rusher, because you've got needs all over this roster.
The philosophy of drafting guys up front with your high picks, I'm fine with that, okay? But some of these guys got to hit, Foskey can't play. Penning is a reclamation project. He got better this year. God bless. Okay, he's not a complete liability at this point. He got better, but he's still not what you would want out of a first-round pick. Peyton Turner was a complete bust. Ruiz is certainly not worth the price that you paid for him. You did hit on McCoy. Davenport set you back 2 drafts. You can't keep doing this the same way, okay? Insanity. You do this over and over again. These are our scouts. This is how we evaluate personnel. This is the way we've always done it. This is the way we'll continue to do it. That has kept you out of the playoffs for 4 years.
To be fair to Loomis, we do think that Sean Payton had quite a bit of a role in some of those picks that were made. He had some of his guys. I think about Adam Troutman when they brought him in. It was kind of thought that was a Sean Payton decision. He was certainly involved in player personnel, so that's part of the history.
That's half of what I just gave you, because he's been gone for 3 years.
Correct. He has been gone, and I understand why you have some people among the fan base who are hesitant to bring in another Sean Payton sort of coaching tree, someone who's been in the organization like Aaron Glenn, who is, I think, going to be a very good head coach. People can take shots at the Lions defense. They have nobody on the field right now. I think he's going to be a good leader of men, a good NFL head coach. I just don't know that it should necessarily be in New Orleans because of that hesitancy. Like, at some point you have to move on from what was the past, because it is the past.
There's no question. I hate it for Aaron Glenn, who I think has done a good job like you do, and has had in this particular year, my goodness, they got the best team in the NFC. They got the 1 seed, and he's been playing with half a lineup for two-thirds of the season right now. So yeah, what he's done is great, and he will be saddled with that Loomis label from the very beginning. For Aaron Glenn, might be better off somewhere else, but I don't know what kind of head coach he's going to be. He's certainly done enough as a coordinator to earn a head coaching job. I don't know if New Orleans is the right place for him. Maybe he can come in and change a culture. He was part of a culture change in Detroit. Certainly, they've never won anything there, and they are now. He's not the head coach, but he's part of that. But you're right. They're going to say this is just Loomis being Loomis. I'm going to get to the head coaching things a little bit later on in the show. We're brought to you by Total Maintenance, AC and heating, generators, electricity, plumbing. Total Maintenance, your one-stop sales and service shop for all of these needs since 1980. One of South Louisiana's oldest and largest AC and heating companies. Slogan's always been service today, every day, so you get service when you call. Nobody wants to go to sleep uncomfortable right now. That is a little bit too cold. New Orleans market as well as the Baton Rouge market, full staffs in both markets. Authorized dealer for Carrier, American Standard, Daykin, and Rheem AC units. Generac and Cummings generators for all your electrical and plumbing needs. In Baton Rouge, it's 480-1000. In New Orleans, 841-3300. Service today, every day at Total Maintenance. We'll take a break, come back here at Walk-Ons in Bruley, live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jimmy, Charlie, and Troy. 3 best buddies sitting around talking sports bets. Let's welcome in Troy Macker from Bet Rivers.
Return here at Walk-Ons in Bruley. Come on by and see us for lunch. Nice and warm here on the covered patio area and enclosed patio area. Go on by. Watch some of the games later this week. We got a hell of a stretch from Thursday to Monday of playoff football, college and pro. I mean, it's about as good of a lineup, spaced out. We like it when they space things out, right? Let's bring in Troy Macker from Bet Rivers. Troy, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, I'm curious as to how the book did in this Week 18 of the NFL, because, Troy, if you tried to go and just play teams, and we know that this is baked into the lines, that had something on the line versus the ones that did, man, you kind of beating your head up against the wall. The Buccaneers needed to win yesterday. Well, they won, but it was all that they could do. The Saints had nothing to play for. They covered with ease. The Falcons needed to win yesterday. They did not. The Patriots needed to lose to keep themselves in the first pick in the draft. They ended up winning. The Chiefs, well, a lot of people love the Chiefs. We had a lot of support for the Chiefs. They mailed it in yesterday. They didn't try anything on defense. The Chargers needed to win. They did win. The the Dolphins needed to win. They didn't win and may have lost Tyreek Hill in the process. So, man, it was kind of tough to play the motivation game this weekend because it was all over the place.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it was a pretty rough weekend for the bettors. I believe only 3 games resulted in losses for the sports book. Baltimore, Cleveland, obviously the Ravens, even with being, 20-point favorites, I think they covered that. The Chargers-Raiders game was a slight win for the public. Chargers have been playing very well, and people have been fading the Raiders all year. And then the Jets-Dolphins was actually a surprise public win, even though the Jets have been out of it. Even though, no one has really loved watching the Jets this year. They've been in primetime too much. People are still betting on them. I can't explain it. I wouldn't bet on them. There's been nothing there for me to bet on. And I don't think this is an avenue in which they were going to fade the Dolphins, even though, potentially because Tua didn't play, maybe there's that aspect there. But nothing that the Jets have done this year has given me any hope to bet on them. So those were the only 3 games that result in wins. That you would figure maybe the Lions-Vikings game. People should be hammering the Lions, but the Vikings obviously are, the second best team potentially in the NFC. We took a lot of split money on that as far as the spread goes, and it wasn't even close. So while, there were tons of bettors out there who were on the Lions, we took a lot of money on the over as well, and that didn't come close because the Vikings, couldn't find anything on offense. It was a pretty bad week for bettors off the tails of what has been 2 very good weeks with, favorites winning and covering, I believe double digits in both weeks. So here's to hoping that the wild card weekend provides a little bit, more results for them. But anything can happen now that we're in the playoffs. And even, some of these games, Ravens-Steelers. Ravens are with 9.5-point favorite, but I don't know, even though the Steelers haven't looked good, that's Ravens-Steelers in the playoffs is very tricky. And honestly, supporting the Ravens and really backing them in the playoffs, they haven't really gone as far as I think people think. So a lot of interesting decisions coming up for bettors.
The Steelers are a tough team to handicap, in my opinion,
right?
Because they always hang. It's easy to underestimate them. The firepower offensively doesn't look like it's there. They just hang around, and then they win their fair share of these things. I thought the Bengals was the right side on Saturday, especially going into the fourth quarter. And they're the Steelers with 2 and a hook, and they get there at the end, and you sat there. I'm sitting there at the end of the game going, how in the hell did they cover that? But they do that a lot in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, it's funny. They may have covered the last pregame line, which I believe it closed at 2 and a hook, but you could get the Bengals -1.5 for most of the week. So that was a game where it all depended on where you got because, we offered 1.5, 2, and 2.5 throughout the week. So you either lost, pushed, or won. And that was a very heavily bet on game, obviously being, one of the Saturday games. It was the second most wagered on game of the week behind Lions-Vikings, which I believe ended up being one of the 2 most wagered on games of the regular season behind just the Ravens-Chiefs season opener. The betting certainly didn't slow down in Week 18, despite the fact that a lot of teams were out of it. There were a lot of backup quarterbacks, and some of the games were just ugly. But, obviously with the division on the line, the number 1 seed on the line in the playoffs, maybe the game didn't live up to the expectations, but the bettors certainly backed alike.
It had we were talking about this, we were watching the games yesterday, that it had a little bit of a preseason feel to it because every game we talked about is who's playing, okay? Yeah. Does that coach care about winning this game? Does this coach not care? Who's the backup quarterback? We got that a lot yesterday. Max's good friend Tim Boyle, was almost cut into the game yesterday, so it kind of had a little bit of that feel. One more question about the props yesterday because there were we spent some time talking about that in pregame with some of the players that had financial incentives to get certain numbers. Did you see a little bit of a boost in the prop market because of that?
Well, I don't know overall, but I can tell you like Mike Evans' receiving yards was one of the most popular player prop of the weekend, and that is, to be expected given that he was going for, an incentive base where he needed 70 yards or something to hit 1,000.
It was 85 was what he needed for the $3 million, and then to get to 1,000 as well. But his total, Max, I think we saw it in the pregame yesterday, was 90 yards. Depends on when you bet it and
right.
Where you're shopping, but he could have gotten that record and been under your prop if you got prop 90 yards yesterday by a yard at the very end of the game. So
and
I don't know where you cashed on that.
One, and we don't take a lot of action on, let's say, Cooper Rush passing yards. But yesterday was a perfect example of taking the under, not because the Cowboys are struggling, but they're out of it. The Commanders, just needed a win for seeding. They were already in it. At what point were the Cowboys going to go to Trey Lance? And they went far earlier than anyone anticipated. So Cooper Rush's passing yards was, I believe, like 175. It was not very large. But basically, if you could highlight or figure out when the Cowboys were going to pull the plug, and it was a close game. It wasn't a blowout. But they went to Trey Lance, I believe, in the mid-second quarter. So if you could have easily caught a win on Cooper Rush under passing yards simply from knowing, and doing some reading on, how many snaps are they thinking Trey Lance is going to get. And there were several games like that. On the other side, Marcus Mariota came in for Jaden Daniels in the early fourth quarter. I know there were a couple other games where that took place as well. So it was really just knowing the player news, so to speak, on especially quarterbacks who didn't have a lot to play for.
I'm not sure that McCarthy ever said that Trey Lance was going to start. Did publicly.
It came out about an hour before, but Trey Lance playing the whole game. It was kind of rumored throughout the week, and that's something, Troy, I'll have to memory bank that one. Think about that next year, because there were a few instances, like in New England, where the quarterback situation was pretty obvious they were going to make a change at some point, and should have gotten on some unders there. It's a good idea there by the bettors.
Troy, let's take a look at a quick look ahead. We'll have more time to do this on Friday, but just some early thoughts about the opening lines on the first round of the NFL playoffs.
Yeah, we've taken some decent action thus far, but I think the real interesting one for me is the two teams that have a lot of expectations heading into the season. And have not really lived up to expectations for the playoffs in the past, whether or not that's because they've run into the Chiefs, or not. Obviously, it's the Bills at home, -9 against the Broncos, who dispatched a backup Chiefs team, but the Broncos have been playing much better. This is clearly where Sean Payton wanted to be. He has his team. They're clicking. And the Bills have struggled in the postseason. I mean, they what was it last year where they played the Dolphins in the snow, and everyone thought, no way Miami even can suit up in the snow, and it was a very close game down to the end. Denver's obviously used to playing in cold conditions. 9 is a lot of points for a playoff game. So that is, I think the Bills win, but I don't know if they cover. And then the Ravens, but as I mentioned earlier, -9.5 against the Steelers. The Steelers have really, the wheels have fallen off, but 9.5 is a lot of points. In a rivalry game, certainly it will be electric in Baltimore, but that's just a lot of points for me for a team that, maybe wins one playoff game, but Lamar hasn't been to an AFC Championship game, I don't believe. So those are the two games I'm highlighting. If you wanted to take dogs to cover, certainly not outright win, but just a lot of points for a playoff game, given that, division rivals on one end, and then the Bills, they need to make the Super Bowl for, Josh Allen's, career thus far to be justified, because he's done basically everything there is except make a Super Bowl, and due in large parts of the Chiefs, but that's neither here nor there, at least not this weekend.
Yeah, and we're going to jump more into this on Friday. We'll see if there's two road favorites. The Chargers and the Texans are a 2.5-point choice. The Vikings are a small choice at the Rams, 1.5. And one rookie quarterback making his debut is Jaden Daniels for your Commanders. They're a 3-point underdog at Tampa. Let me get to college basketball, Troy. One of the stories we've been talking about is how strong the SEC is in the pre-conference. They started conference play on Saturday. I don't know if this is going to hold or not. We think the league is deep, but the top-heavy part of the league showed just on Saturday at least how much further they are ahead than that second tier. Arkansas went into Tennessee and got blown out. Oklahoma, who was undefeated, went into Alabama and got housed. Now, Florida-Kentucky was a terrific game and was kind of back and forth. But Missouri, who was 11-2, certainly respectable, got blown out at Auburn. Texas, who was 11-2, got blown out at Texas A&M. So the top of the league flexing its muscles here a little bit in the opening game.
Yeah, I think Tennessee and Auburn are the two best teams in the country. Super impressed. They have two of the best players in the country, and Zakai Ziegler for Tennessee and Johnny Broome for Auburn. Really deep teams that can shoot and also play, the full was it 90 feet and play the entire game. They were just hard-nosed teams. But like you mentioned, you go down to Kentucky. This was a wait-and-see team, and right now they look like an elite national championship contender. Oklahoma, I've been out on. I know they were undefeated, but their competition hasn't been all that great. Certainly, they played 3 games against top 25 teams. The team I really is sneaky good is Florida, who hasn't gotten a lot of cred. Certainly they've only played 1 game against top 25 teams, but they are going to be a tough out all year. This conference is really so deep. I mean, the worst team is South Carolina. They're 10-4. I don't think they're going to do all that well in conference play, but it's just been really impressive. I haven't even mentioned the Alabamas of the world or Arkansas. With all the Calipari love. Even Georgia was 11-0 with some big wins at one point, and they were an afterthought typically in the SEC. So this is going to be so deep. But we talk about depth. At least I have in the past about the Big Ten. The Big Ten tends to beat itself up, and then you end up with like the 4th best team in Wisconsin and end up winning the conference because it's just really hard to navigate late January and February when you're playing top 25 teams 3 times in a row in conference play, and that's what you're going to have in the next 5 to 6 weeks in the SEC. But it should be so much fun to watch because we're going to get more games like that Kentucky-Florida game, and it's just great for everyone involved.
Follow him on X at Troy Macker, Machir. Bet Rivers, of course, very, very good to us over the years. And so, Troy, we always appreciate your time. We'll look forward to talking with you on Friday. Absolutely. Thanks, guys. We'll take a break here at Walk-Ons in Bruley, live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Live
at lunch with Ott and Hanny from Walk-Ons in Bruley on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Precious few college football games left for us this season, but whoever decided to put the FCS championship on the Monday night when there was no Monday Night Football had a really good idea because we actually get to watch this game now, Max. You have a recommendation here on Montana State and North Dakota State for the FCS national championship tonight.
Yeah, 15-0 Montana State. I think this is their year. They're laying 3.5 against North Dakota State. North Dakota State, a powerhouse of the SEC, have won 9 championships in FCS since 2011, but I just think this is Montana State's time. They've blown out pretty much everyone they've played all year. If you watch this game, look out for their quarterback, Tommy Mellott. This guy can throw the ball. He can run a little bit. 29 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this year. This is their time in Frisco. I think we're going to see some offense in this game, so it should be an exciting one. You'll see Trey Lance's brother is leading the Bison in receiving yards, so I'm obviously a little partial to the Lances. But I'm going to go with the Bobcats in Montana State minus 3.5.
Can't believe you didn't have a prop bet on Trey Lance yesterday. Cooper Rush would have been the one, though. You go on to him, he doesn't even play. Only 2 teams have been within 1 score of Montana State all year. One of them was New Mexico, who's obviously an FBS program. The other one was UC Davis. Bobcats tonight in Frisco, Texas. Hour number 2 straight ahead at Walk-Ons in Bruley. Live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
With Ott and Hanny from Walk-Ons in Bruley on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
And we're back here at Walk-Ons Bruley. Beautiful day, cold. We're preparing a little bit. We were talking yesterday, we were watching the games, Max. Like, there's going to be some rain tonight, and then here comes the cold. It's going to be a cold week here, but we're nice and toasty. Not only are we out on this front I call it covered patio, but it's this covered front area where you roll it on the nice days where it's really warm outside. You roll the garage doors up, and it's fantastic. Days like today, you got them down, nice and warm in here, but you still get the nice views. Sunshiny day here in Bruley, Louisiana.
Oh, yeah, Charlie, this is my walk-on. So from this side, so I've frequented this establishment, this fine establishment, quite many times, and sat and watched quite a few games at the bar right next to us. So,
couple of this is what they call Black Monday in the NFL because of the number of firings that go on this day. I'll be honest with you, it was not quite as bad as I thought it might be. The Jags fired Doug Peterson earlier today, but they kept their GM, Tim Balke. Not really sure why.
I want his job security.
We were talking about this during the break. His resume and why he's still running things in Jacksonville, because the new coach, Shahid Khan, already said, the owner already said the new coach is going to report to me. I don't know how that works, but okay. Balke still got a job. He left ruin in his wake in San Francisco, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and he got the job there because his boss was fired and he got promoted to GM, and the same thing happened to him in Jacksonville. He has now survived the firings of 5 head coaches: Mike Singletary, Jim Harbaugh, Jim Tomsula, and now Urban Meyer and Doug Peterson in Jacksonville. It is quite odd. I'm very surprised that he survived this. I thought it was kind of a certainty that he'd be gone because it's been a pretty bad organization over the last few years.
It's not, though, a unattractive job. First of all, you've got an owner that's got a little bit of patience, okay? You got to deal with the London stuff, but he's got a little bit of patience. The Jaguars have a franchise quarterback, at least what they think is a franchise quarterback. Now, if you don't like Trevor Lawrence, then this is not an attractive job at all. But if you like Trevor Lawrence, then and if you think you've got a top 12 quarterback, where is he now? 2 years ago, we had him in the top 6 or 7. Now, look, there's some work to be done there with him for sure, but he's not somebody that we don't think can't be fixed, right?
I can't get out of my head. I've seen a comparison at some point earlier this year where they compared the first few starts, I guess about 50, 55 starts, for Trevor Lawrence and Daniel Jones. And the comparison is striking. And Daniel Jones is now not a starting quarterback. He was a third stringer you saw on the sidelines last night for the Vikings. So Lawrence has a lot of pre-built-in goodwill because he's a first overall pick and because people thought of him as a sure thing when he came in.
Well,
but
2 years ago when they won the playoff game, they came from behind in the playoff game against
good.
the Chargers. Yeah, you've seen him do some good things.
But we've seen enough of just bad mistakes, airmails, some inaccuracies at wrong points, and he has not been very reliable throughout his whole career. He's been inconsistent at the very least.
He's in place. If you think you can fix, now if you don't think you can fix him, then you don't think that this is a very good job. But you've got him. You've got Brian Thomas, who ended up leading all rookie receivers, edged out Malik Neighbors for the most yards. And this was a very good class of receivers. What Neighbors did, if we're going to call Brock Bowers, who set the record for tight end receptions, rookie record for tight end receptions. Ladd McConkey had a great year with the Chargers. I mean, there was some.
Jalen McMillan
had a terrific year. Marvin Harrison, maybe not the impact year that people thought he would have. He still had almost 900 yards. This was a very good receiver class, and you got one of the best in Brian Thomas. You got the 5th pick in the draft. You got $31 million in cap space. This is not a terrible job, okay? You got to go in there and fix some things, and it starts with Lawrence, but there's some players there that you can work with. There's some building blocks. I say this with a certain amount of disdain in my voice because I would rather be in Jacksonville's position by like 1,000% than the Saints' position. If there is a candidate out there, and I don't know that there is, that says Jacksonville job or New Orleans job, it's Jacksonville 11 times out of 10.
Yeah, I think regardless of what you think of Trevor Lawrence, this is a team that if you're competing for the same head coach right now, you're a little bit nervous if you're New Orleans. I think Jacksonville is a more palatable, more a job that you'd want a little bit more at this point.
If you're ranking the jobs, Chicago is a better job. They've got their quarterback. Now, if the quarterback ends up not being any good, well, so be it. But the Bears have where did I just lose? It's $60 million in cap money to spend. They have the number 10 pick in the draft. They have their quarterback in place. They have a first-round receiver in place there. They got to rebuild that offensive line, but that's a better job. If the Raiders' job comes open, I don't know that that's a better job, but at least they have a path to a quarterback. In New Orleans, you don't have a path to a quarterback unless Rattler's a lot better than I think he is. You don't have any cap space. You don't have a top 5 pick in the draft. If you do think that Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward, or if he comes out, we're starting to hear a little Drew Aller noise out of Penn State. You don't have a path to any of those guys without trading picks, which you really can't afford to do. So it's a better job there. We talked about Aaron Glenn a little bit. We both feel the same way about Aaron Glenn. Good coach, deserving coach, going to be a head coach somewhere, maybe in New Orleans. He comes in here, he'll have the one Loomis strike against him that Loomis is unwilling to think outside the box. Here's another name that came up over the weekend, Matt Nagy. You just made a face, which is kind of what I did when I heard that name too. Matt Nagy is the offensive coordinator in Kansas City right now for the Chiefs. He gets no credit for that. Sorry, Andy Reid runs that show. They tried to tell me all up and down, how good a head coaching candidate Eric Bieniemy was when he left Kansas City because he had learned all that stuff. I was willing to watch. He went to Washington, got fired, went to UCLA and got fired. If you're the offensive coordinator in Kansas City, I'm sorry, it's just like Pete Carmichael was in New Orleans. You're the OC for Sean Payton. You're basically a staffer because Payton was calling the plays. And if you're in Kansas City, even if you are calling the plays, it's Andy Reid's offense and you're coordinating Pat Mahomes. So you got to go back and look at Nagy's time with the Bears if you really want a true indication of maybe what you're getting here. He's only 46 years old. His first year with the Bears, they won the NFC North. They were 12-4. Is that impressive?
I would say so in Chicago.
Who was his quarterback?
2018 Trubisky?
Yes. Yeah. He won a division title with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. This was a double doink year. Okay, they lost to Philadelphia. They're so close to winning. With Mitchell Trubisky, he went 12-4. Now, after that, Mitchell Trubisky turned into Mitchell Trubisky. He was 8-8 the next 2 seasons. One of those years, they lost to the Saints in the Dome in the wild card game, and then the last year he was 6-11. So he's 34-31.
Well, look, in Chicago, that's a good thing. Let's be honest. As of late, 34-31. We talk about quarterbacks sometimes. Like we're giving Caleb Williams a longer leash because he's in a bad situation. I talked about Spencer Rattler earlier. Obviously, he's in a bad situation. So you give them a little breathing room. You got to give it to head coaches as well when they're in really bad organizations that have a lot of things going against head coaches.
I hate it less than I did when I first heard it. Does it excite me? Like, oh, man. No, but at least if you bring some of this experience, I say you get no credit for being the Kansas City offensive coordinator. Look, if you're in there soaking up some of the information in that room, if you sit next to Andy Reid for a while, doesn't count against you either. I'm not just saying, oh, look at what Kansas City's doing. Matt Nagy's the offense. No, Reid's the coach and Mahomes is the quarterback. But I'm not going to count it against him either. It's just more about what he did with the Bears. He's only 46 years old. Been on 2 Super Bowl championship staffs. One with Kansas City and the other one with Kansas City. I thought the other one was with Philadelphia.
Yeah,
they were both with Kansas City. Yes, two different stints there. Is it my favorite hire? No, but it is outside of the tree. And again, you got to look at it and say, who's going to want this job? It's one of 32. Pays pretty well. Those salaries aren't usually released, but pays pretty well. Okay, so you're going to get somebody to take this thing. But if you have a choice, you're going to go somewhere else. The Saints have the 9th pick in the draft. The Saints are, as we speak, right now, $66 million over the cap. The next highest is $21 million, which is the Browns. The Browns have the albatross of the Deshaun Watson contract hanging around their neck. Okay, even with the restructure, and they are still $45 million in better shape than the Saints. Think about that for a minute, okay? So you come in, salary cap is going to limit what you can do in free agency. I'm not saying they will get under this cap by the start of the new league year in March. They may even be able to maneuver to the point where they've got a little bit of money to spend in free agency. But if you do that, does it at the cost of what as far as contract restructures? If you're out there saying, and I don't want to get into salary cap economics and how you can fix this and do all that stuff because it's boring as hell. I can just tell you that if your idea out there is just cut all those guys, take the hit next year and move on, it's not that simple. These contracts have been reconfigured in ways to where you just can't. Like if they just wanted to cut Cam Jordan tomorrow and say, hey, look, Cam, thanks for the memories, that's it. No, they can't do that. They got a $23 million cap hit. So do you cut him after June 1st so you can spread it out over 2 years? The same thing with Derek Carr. You know, I say, get rid of Derek Carr. He's terrible. Look, they didn't win a game without him at quarterback this year. He's by far the best quarterback on the roster, by far. And you already got to pay for him next year. You just soon keep him. I mean, somebody's got to play quarterback next year. It's not like, what are they going to do? I mean, they're going to trade for J.J. McCarthy?
Trey Lance, maybe.
Stop with the Trey Lance. You want to sign Kirk Cousins? I mean, he's Derek Carr, but 3 years older and a lot more hurt.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to play quarterback next year. So we cut Carr and go with Rattler and just see what you got. Okay, I might be able to get behind that. Cost you $50 million. It's some way, shape, or form. Cost you $50 million. Is Taysom Hill going to be worth $17 million on next year's cap? Is Tyrann Mathieu going to be worth $12 million on next year's cap? I know that Cam Jordan, I love Cam Jordan, okay? I love everything about Cam Jordan. He has been the consummate professional since he's been in New Orleans. He's been a highly productive player. He's been great in the community. He's been a great spokesman for the team. He's a great representative of the team. I love Cam Jordan. The day he hangs up his cleats, put his name up on the wall in the Superdome, put him in the Saints Hall of Fame, put him in the Ring of Honor, and maybe Canton, okay? But he can't play anymore at a $23 million level. He just can't, okay? He's not that player anymore. And would it pain me to see Cam Jordan wearing, a Lions jersey next year or for the Steelers or wherever he would end up? Yeah, it would. But that's just how that goes. I had to almost throw up when I saw Ricky Jackson go out in a 49ers uniform. When I watched Bobby Hebert in a Falcons uniform airplaning around the Superdome, that wasn't a good day. When I watched Morton Anderson kicking for multiple teams after that, or Joe Horn in Atlanta, or Willie Rofe in Kansas City, I mean, I'm sorry, it's just sometimes you gotta part ways, and I don't know how to do that with a lot of these contracts. That's why this job is a hard sell, because this is not a one-year rebuild; it's a multi-year rebuild, and that's if you get the draft choices right.
You had one more coaching availability come open yesterday, and the Patriots, Drake May.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a more palatable job, I would say. Now that you're a little bit removed from Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft said today that it was the hardest decision he's ever had to make, letting go Mayo. It was so hard that he let him go like 3 hours after the game.
Yeah, they had made this decision weeks ago.
One little bit of news this morning. NFL Network's Jane Slater reporting that David Shaw will be one of the interviews for the Saints. He's been interviewed for many NFL jobs before. I'm not saying he's going to get it, but
At one time in his time at Stanford, he was a very, very hot NFL candidate. Quite a bit of time has passed since that was the case. Let me say something about the Patriots job here for a second, because that news broke when we were watching the games yesterday. This is a fail on the Patriots organization, in my opinion, more so than Gerard Mayo. And here's why. You spent 3 years. They restructured his contract when he was a staffer for Belichick that he was going to take over. And this is not somebody that came in from outside your organization and you looked and you went, wow, that's the way he does things? I don't want that guy. You knew what you had. You trusted him to take over for a guy like Belichick. And I don't know what they were expecting from a result standpoint this year, but what was the Patriots' win total before the season? Probably a 4 or 5?
I think it was 4.5.
And they won 4, okay? They had to break in the quarterback. It took them about 6 weeks, which is not unusual. He's got no roster there. I mean, if you're doing this based on the results of the season, you must have seen something behind the scenes that we don't know, and you should have known that before because he's been in your building for a long time. So if you're firing Mayo based on what you saw in the results this season, what were you expecting? If Andy Reid had gone in to coach the Patriots this year, Max, what would their record have been? 6-11?
Yeah, maybe 2 more wins.
I mean, 7-10, maybe.
Mayo made some game management errors, but we see that across the league. That doesn't mean they get fired after a year. He never had a fair shake. Let's be honest.
If you brought him in from somewhere else and you were completely blindsided, personality, culture, whatever, fine. This guy's been in your building. You gave him 1 year. He won 4 games, so you're like, that's it? No, I'm sorry. That's one of the more – but it is one of – if not the most appealing jobs in the league. Why? Well, first of all, you got your quarterback in place. Now, if you don't like him as a quarterback, then it's different. You have the 4th pick in the draft, and if 2 of the top picks in the draft are going to be quarterbacks, you got a legitimate shot to get the top player, non-quarterback, on the board. I mean, I would think Travis Hunter's going to go 3rd to the Giants, but you never know.
You could trade up a little bit to get him.
If Aller comes out, you may end up with the best non-quarterback in this draft and, wait for it, the most cap money of anybody in the league. They've got $118 million in effective cap space to play next year. You can get better in a hurry. You can draft an impact guy at the top of the draft. I don't know how you feel about ownership. You had a real stable situation for 20 years, and you fired the next guy after less than a calendar year. But as far as personnel, there's some stuff to build on there.
No doubt. I think Aller should come out. Frankly, this is a weaker class, and he might kind of elevate from there. The one bit of bad news, Charlie, you said this is a multi-year problem for New Orleans, multi-year rebuild. Next year, if you wanted them to tank, it's going to be even harder once again. 42% winning percentage among their opponents. Those came out yesterday after
they got the 4th place schedule.
All the results. They got so they thanks to the Panthers beating the Falcons, your schedule got a lot easier. They get the Giants, the Bears, and the Titans outside of their divisional matchups, and they got some easier divisions. So yeah, Giants, Titans, Bears, those are easier opponents, and obviously things can change, but once again, the Saints' schedule will allow for them to be mediocre, not the worst.
And I don't want to think about tanking for next season on the first day after this season, but I get where you're coming from. It is a multi-year rebuild. We're here at Walk-Ons in Brewley, live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Live at lunch.
The Thibodeau store. If your New Year's resolution is, man, I got to fix up these some of these things around the house, some of these nagging little projects, but you don't know how to do them, you're not really sure how to proceed, let the experts at the Thibodeau store help you out, because it's that customized customer service that they are known for. If you've got a little woodworking project, you got a little plumbing project, you want to lay some concrete, let them walk you through step by step some of the projects that you can do. Save yourself some money, and you're going to save some time as well, because you're not going to have to refer to a YouTube video. You're going to be able to call and ask these people exactly how to proceed. You're not going to have wasted time. You're not going to have wasted supplies. 900 St. Patrick Highway in Thibodeau. Also a huge supply of grills, crawfish pots, jambalaya pots. We're almost in the crawfish season. Custom-made Cypress furniture and a ton of fishing gear. Online, ThibodeauStore.com. You can arrange for free delivery. 900 St. Patrick Highway in Thibodeau. It's Thibodeau Store.
Live at lunch with Ott and Hanny from Walk-Ons in Brewley on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
An amendment to the story right before. We have conflicting media reports on David Shaw.
Yeah, Nick Underhill in the last few minutes tweeting out that the Saints do not have plans to interview David Shaw at this time. So I'll take Underhill's word for that.
Shaw was one of the brightest stars in the college game at the beginning of the decade. What he did out at Stanford, he won a couple of Rose Bowls. The first 5 years, I think they won. The first 6 years, they won double-digit games 5 times, and at Stanford, that's no small feat. He played in multiple Rose Bowls at Stanford. They played in a Fiesta Bowl one year back when that still, meant something. Bottom fell out on him, though, the last 4 years, not counting the COVID year. 4-8, 3-9, 3-9, and he left. Now I think we were talking during the break. I think of him as older than he actually is. He's only 52. He got that Stanford job when he was 39, and he had worked in the league with the Ravens and with the Eagles, and he was very highly thought of. And for a time there, he was kind of one of the hot names that was going to move from college to the NFL. It never happened, and he eventually, parted ways with them. He resigned at the end of the 2022 season. He's with the Broncos now. This doesn't help, okay? I'm sorry, Sean Payton doesn't work for you anymore, okay? You don't need to go off of his staff or off of somebody that was on one of his prior staffs. You're allowed to look outside of the box on that. I don't know if David Shaw would be a good NFL coach. Plenty of college coaches have failed at the higher level, even those that were assistant coaches there before. We can name plenty of guys, not the least of which was Nick Saban, who was a terrific defensive coordinator with the Cleveland Browns, but was not, was a pretty short stint with the Dolphins. We think that Mike Vrabel going to New England makes a lot of sense. The top two names on the board are Vrabel and Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator with the Lions. And Vrabel's been mentioned for pretty much every job that's open out there because he's one of the most qualified guys out there. Him going back to New England makes too much sense not to happen, right?
Right. I mean, that's an obvious answer. Eventually, past Bill Belichick, they clearly wanted to keep it sort of in the organization at the moment. Going to Vrabel, that makes a ton of sense.
We talk about what. Who would you go after? And this is a case of if you're Mike Vrabel, you have choices. There are multiple choices. Why would you take and he won multiple division titles with Tennessee. They were in the AFC Championship game his second year. He's 9 games over 500 because it fizzled out at the end there at Tennessee, but he's a pretty solid head coach. If he's got choices, he's going to pick something else. I did find a job that I think is worse than the Saints. Which one would that be? Got to be the Jets, right? The Jets, I think, is a worse job. Hear
Rex
me out.
Rex Ryan thinks he's got it, but
well, and God bless if he does. He actually won some games there, but I think the Jets job is worse than the Saints job. But for the biggest reason, I think the owner is a lot worse. Okay, and I think the owner is worse now. I think he's more impatient now than he was when Ryan was the coach there the first time. Assuming Aaron Rodgers won't be back, and I think that's a pretty safe assumption, you don't have a quarterback and you don't have a path to one. Your salary cap situation is better than the Saints. You're $20 million under the cap, which is a bonanza compared to what's going on in New Orleans. But it's not like you've got like the Patriots do over $100 million in free cap money. And I don't know. Some of your draft capital has been compromised because you do have your first-round pick, but some of your draft capital has been compromised because of a couple of trades. So I don't know. I don't – mostly because of the owner. I would say the Jets job's a little bit worse than the Saints
when they're
job.
Reporting that his teenage son is making decisions based
he had to
on
come out and
ratings.
he had to come out and make a statement.
I don't know if I believe him. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, I guess, that report, but – the ownership, it's clearly different. I think you take the roster of the Jets right now over New Orleans. They've got some talent defensively. They regressed a little bit.
Healthy roster for healthy roster. I don't know that there's a lot of difference. A healthy Saints roster. Not what we saw yesterday. Healthy Saints roster. If
we were assuming Adams and Garrett Wilson are both back next year, and there was some speculation that Wilson would leave if Rodgers stays, but I think overall I'd still take the Jets roster.
There's more star power at the top. Garrett Wilson is a bona fide number one receiver as long as he's got a quarterback throwing to him that doesn't favor the other guy. Sauce Gardner, coming into the year, we thought of him as the best cornerback in the league. He did not have a great season. Surtain had a much better year than Sauce Gardner, but he's still one of the top guys. If he's not number one, he's certainly in the top 3 or 4. So there's some star power up there. Or would you rather be in Brian Daboll's spot today? Kept his job this morning and got, I don't know, this was almost a public, kind of an embarrassment, what the Maras put out today. John Mara, the team president, said, I want to get this quote straight because it says, Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, who's the GM, will continue in their respective roles. As disappointing as the results have been, Chairman Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented their vision for our team for the result that we all desire. And here's the part. Better not take too long because I've just about run out of patience. I mean, this is the closest thing to a public tongue lashing that an NFL owner can give to a coach. It's like a parent scolding their child. If you stay out past curfew one more time, if you make one more bad grade, I don't know, man. I don't know how good I'd feel about that if I was Brian Daboll. I was like, look, if that's your deal, you just ratcheted up not that the pressure's not huge. You didn't make my job any easier with this.
Yeah, he said sort of passive-aggressively, I'm going to have to be in a better mood this time next year. Well, I guess so. But, look, I don't think it's really Daboll's fault. They haven't had a good roster. You could even sense from the Hard Knocks offseason, which has been mentioned plenty of times about letting Saquon Barkley walk and how Mara couldn't stand seeing him succeed in the division, and turns out he did. But, they ran it back with Daniel Jones. I don't know that anyone really wanted that situation. That's just kind of what they decided to go with. So I'm a little more surprised that Joe Shane survived this than Daboll, who I think is still a little bit respected among coaching circles and is not really to blame for their situation.
They were bad this season, 3-14 bad. So there's not a whole lot of defense you can come with off of it. And, again, quarterback, path to a quarterback, I don't know that they have one. They got the third pick in the draft.
Daboll's in trouble. There's no doubt. But I don't know how much is his fault. At
Papa Mara said for sure. Okay,
yeah.
just in case anybody didn't know before that. We're brought to you by Louisiana Health and Injury Centers, helping you deal with pain. Dr. Michael Goff and his staff done a phenomenal job for my family over the years. So whether it's neck pain, back pain, things that are, man, you're just hurting. You'll do anything to make it go away. It's maybe keeping you from getting a good night's sleep or getting around. Let them target those problem areas. Do for you what they've done for us, which is find the right techniques, the right exercises, the right stretches, the right adjustments. Maybe it's a dry needle or electric nerve stimulation, cryo or ultrasound therapy. They can get you to feeling better. Airline Highway, Plank Road, Jefferson Highway near Drusilla, Dr. Michael Goff, Louisiana Health and Injury Centers. We'll take a break. We'll switch over to basketball, the first weekend of SEC play this past Saturday. From Walk-Ons in Bruley, live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Live at lunch with Ott and Hanny from Walk-Ons in Bruley on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Show's available on demand at 1045ESPN.com as well as the new LouisianaSports.net. If you missed anything earlier in the day, we spent a lot of the day talking about the Saints, a little bit of time talking about the NFL and the other coaching searches that are going on right now. I want to touch on some college basketball. Max, you went out to the game on Saturday. I watched on television. Thank you for going out. You got a bird's eye view of the Vanderbilt LSU game. Vanderbilt won the game 80-72. I watched this game on TV. Why LSU lost the game is pretty easy, okay? I watched the game from start to finish, but even if I hadn't watched the game from start to finish, I could have looked at the box score and said, okay, LSU turned the ball over too much. They didn't shoot it particularly badly, but they got dominated on the glass, especially on the offensive glass. And I'll tell you how I felt watching this game, Max, for a lot of it. It felt like one of those football games where your team never has the ball. One of those games that one team leads in time of possession like 41-19, and you're like, man, we just never we didn't have the ball. They had the ball. There was one sequence, and I know you'll remember this, where Vanderbilt scored 6 points with LSU getting a shot off. So I know why they lost Saturday, but you were there and you got to see it firsthand. What did you think?
Well, I think the glaring stat really is 5 assists to 15 turnovers.
Yep.
And this was a home game. At least Vanderbilt going on the road, they had more assists than turnovers. I'd understand if they, let the environment get a little bit the better of them and, started turning the ball over. But this has been a problem for LSU for a little while now, and they really don't get much offense from any bigs, so I wasn't expecting that. I was a little surprised to see the rebounding difference that you mentioned. But, Vanderbilt, they just kind of kept stiff-arming LSU. Every time LSU tried to get back in the game, Vanderbilt would answer. They've got a bunch of transfers, 10 transfers on this roster, Vanderbilt. I mean, this is basically a brand-new team. A.J. Hogard, who came in from Michigan State, I watched him a good bit with Sparty, and he was not the most impressive player that Michigan State's had, really. They reportedly paid him up to $800,000 to transfer in, but he had 17 points in this game. It's two teams that are very similar in my book. They're probably on the outside looking in at SEC play. Having watched the Florida-Kentucky game right before going to this game, so watch the first half of Tennessee against Arkansas, watching some quality basketball in the conference, and then watching this game, there was a real step down in terms of what this game was made of. And ultimately, I thought these teams were pretty equal going in. I thought LSU would win the game, though, being at home, and instead they lose. So it feels like it might be getting late early if things don't go well tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm not going to – this is my vow to you, and even if I didn't vow this, when Jimmy comes back, he's not going to – he's just going to roll his eyes anyway, so I'm not going to do big picture on LSU basketball after all 18 conference games. But I do want to – after this first one, I do want to do a little bit of that. The SEC is having an unprecedented year in the non-conference play. There are some people that believe that maybe the record is a little bit inflated where the middle of the conference is concerned, because a lot of these mid-majors that they're playing have just been decimated in the transfer portal. We'll see if that plays out over time. Certainly on Saturday, the upper tier of the league really flexed their muscles. There was only one game that was in single digits, and that was that Florida-Kentucky game, which was the best game of the weekend that I saw. Florida is very, very good. They were right there with Kentucky. Maybe the most impressive blitz of the whole weekend was when Kentucky went from, I think it was 11 down to 5 up in about 4 minutes in the first half. They went on a 16-0 run, and then that game kind of settled in, and Florida got themselves back into it in the second half, and it was a terrific game. Ended up 106-100. Every other game was double digits, and most of these games were big blowouts. Tennessee beat a ranked Arkansas team by 24. Alabama beat a ranked Oklahoma team by 28. Texas A&M beat a 11-2 Texas team by 20. Ole Miss beat a 12-1 Georgia team by a dozen. So the top half of the league really kind of flexed. Fine, okay, there's no problem with that. Vanderbilt was the only road team to win, Max. The rest of them, we know what home court advantage means in college basketball. Vanderbilt was the only road team to win, and it was one of only 2 games that was within single digits. How many players did you say Vanderbilt brought in?
10 transfers. They have 1 player back from last year's team. 1
player back from last year's team. So this is a complete turnover for Byington, okay? Mark Byington, who came in from James Madison, I believe it was.
Yes.
He turned over the entire roster, and right here out of the chute, on the road, he's already better than you, okay? At least they were better Saturday. I don't know if these teams played 15 times, how many each would win, but he's already ahead of you. Well, he had to turn the whole roster over. No, this guy turned the whole roster over. Well, there's not a ton of NIL. No, Vanderbilt is not competing in the NIL game with the Alabamas and the Kentuckys and the height of the Big East or something like that for basketball guys. Sorry, they're just not. And here they are at 13-1, one season in. What was Vanderbilt's record last year? You remember? You ain't got to look it up. I did.
Yeah.
4-14 in the league.
Yeah.
They were bad last year. Now, that was the worst of Stackhouse's years. The year before that, Stackhouse actually saved his job. They were 11-7 in the league. So it's not like Vanderbilt's been bad forever, but they were bad last year. He came in, he looked at the roster, he turned the whole thing over, and here they are at 13-1. Now, do I expect Vanderbilt to finish in the top half of the SEC? I do not. I think the league's too good for that. But do I think that they can win 7 games? Maybe. Okay. Do I think LSU can win 7 games? I do not. This is one of a handful of games where you're not going to be a pretty big underdog. In McMahon's defense, I didn't think they'd win 9 last year either. And he is dealing with the Jalen Reed injury. But it's just not there, man. I've watched this team half a dozen times now. They're okay. They may even be better than last year's team and not have the record to show for it. But there's nothing that I look at in this team and go, man, they're building this. There's not a lot of star power on this team. There's some good players. Cam Carter's a good player, okay? If Cam Carter's your God bless, okay? He had some very good games. He's had a very good career. If Cam Carter's your third best player, you got a really good team. Cam Carter's your best player, you're probably not in the top half of the league. It's just how it is. Robert Miller was a very highly rated recruit. Got pushed around a little bit physically down there. A lot of times that happens to freshman posts, okay? I'm not laying out this entire, assessment of his career. He's got some ways to go. Victorious Miller, I think, has got a lot of talent. But you saw step up in class. And Carter is very candid. I will give him that. Said after the game, hey, this was our welcome to the SEC moment. So if a couple of those freshmen, got baptism by fire, I get that. But I don't see where they are building something where it's like, man, look, next year they're going to be really good. Or look at this, handful of guys, man, they're right on the cusp of stardom. Or they've got this big guy coming in. Or, here's what they're doing on the recruiting trail. It's all been okay. Some of the numbers have been better. And I understand building slow at times. But it's just frustrating as hell when a school like Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt's got way more basketball tradition than they do football tradition, don't get me wrong. But when they come in, they get a coach who's not a big name, turns over the entire roster with not Kentucky or, North Carolina's resources, and here they are. They're already better than you. Sorry. It's frustrating.
Look, LSU's the program's probably heading in the right direction. The team's getting better as McMahon's been here. But, when LSU went on the road and beat Kansas State, we thought that was a good win at the time. We started thinking about maybe this could be a bubble tournament team. You started to think bigger picture, but Kansas State, they're 7-6. LSU's strength of schedule to this point is 310th. They haven't really played a whole lot of teams. So the SEC, if we see more of this, it could be a lot like this, where it's welcome to the SEC, but all season long. And, there's going to be some team in the conference that goes 2-16, 3-15. It's inevitable. There are too many good teams.
Tell me who the other candidates are to go 2-16 besides this group.
You could just say South Carolina is probably the worst team in the conference, but still good enough to beat Clemson.
Mm-hmm. Who beat Kentucky?
You could say Missouri, who you play tomorrow, on the road, might be a candidate for that. But
they got a chance
Kansas
to win that game.
They
LSU's actually got a chance to win that game, but I don't know. I can't favor them against anybody on the road.
Missouri will be about a 7-point favorite in that game tomorrow.
It's not like one of these. Look, when you play the Alabamas and Tennessees and Auburns of the world, you're going to be a big underdog. You're going to be a double-digit underdog by plenty.
Look, ultimately the frustration for me, and this will be the case for a long time, but when I go to the PMAC, I look up near the American flag when the national anthem is being played. There's a big banner, 2023 national champs, women's basketball. They just raised one for gymnastics this week, 2024.
Well, they'll put
big
the men's
banners
up
right up there.
If they ever win one, they'll put one up.
They'll put one up, but it's not anytime soon, and that's just the frustration is that you're the bottom half of the conference, and Vanderbilt's, right now better than you. That's the sad reality.
When LSU wants to be good in something, and they put their resources towards it, you can tell, okay? They wanted to be good in women's basketball. They went out and they spent plenty of money, and they still are, okay? They want to be good in baseball. They went out and they spent plenty of money, and they still are, okay? When they wanted to be good in gymnastics, and they built that facility, and here they are, okay? They needed their NIL dollars put together. And look, football gets 10 of everything that they need because they have to. It runs the athletic department. I understand that. But I watched them spend money on tennis and softball and track and field and beach volleyball, which didn't even exist 5-6 years ago. And I just don't feel like they have ever put that those kind of maybe they don't have them. Maybe they're like, if we could be good in all these other things, men's basketball just is not going to get the dollars or whatever. But you just don't see them shopping in the NIL departments that other people are sitting in. You look at the relative talent on the roster as compared to the rest of the teams in the league. Shame of it is, you'd have done this 10 years ago. Had this slow build process, and you brought in a coach, and believed in all this stuff. You could have really made some hay because 10 years ago nobody else in the league was spending any money, but they are now.
The conference cares about men's basketball.
They do now.
So just
10 years ago they didn't.
We hope LSU can catch up and follow their lead.
Yeah, and I don't want to dump on the whole season. This is one game out of 18, but this is one of the weaker teams. I mean, Vanderbilt might win 7 games, but they might win 4. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're not going to finish in the top 5 in the conference, and they had to turn over all of the excuses that we've heard. Okay, well, we're not a high resource basketball program. Well, neither are they. We had to turn over the entire roster. Well, so did they. Okay, this game is at home. Do we have? And I understand it was a very nice crowd Saturday.
It was decent. The students weren't in, but outside of that, there was a lot of cheap tickets that were full.
You ain't going to get 13,000 in there for a men's game.
Good bit of energy.
Okay.
Youth on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah,
and a disappointing start to the season. We'll take a break here at Walk-Ons in Brewley, live at lunch, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
With Ott and Hanny from Walk-Ons in Brewley on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Black Friday stuff continues here as the Bengals fire defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. This is a little bit tough for me. We watched the Bengals a lot closer, obviously, since Joe Burrow's been there. He was terrific in their Super Bowl season. The numbers have fallen off. I don't know that this is entirely his fault, given the resources that the Bengals have. And by resources, I mean money and players. I mean, when they lost Jesse Bates, the safety who went to Atlanta, it's a big, big loss for him. He was pretty much a quarterback. He was kind of the brains of the operation back there in that secondary, and they never recovered from that. They had some injuries. Hendrickson's been fantastic, but I don't know really how much he's got to work with. But Zach Taylor will be back. Anarumo won't. I don't know that that's fair, but that's the world we live in.
You could swap that, but yeah, Anarumo, he'll get another job at some point somewhere. He's pretty well respected. I know Randy McKay, when he would come on, would always talk very highly of him.
I think he's a good coach. I think it's a bad situation there, and they're obviously they're married to Zach Taylor. Okay, ownership is. I know it drives Jimmy nuts when he's here, but they are. Okay, for better or for worse, they got to make some changes because, well, they didn't make the playoffs and they should have, so they're going to fire this guy. Are they firing the wrong guy? It might be. They very well could. A couple of recruiting things I want to pass on to you. Zach Nagy from Sports Illustrated got two reports out there in the last 24 hours about visits for LSU prospective transfer portal targets. NC State cornerback Tamarcus Cooley will be in for a visit here early this week. Cooley had a pretty good year for NC State last year. And the other one is Texas A&M tight end Donovan Green is going to arrive, according to Nagy's report, on Friday for a multi-day stay in town. There's a couple things I take out of this. Number one, if you didn't believe before, and I think everybody probably did after the Texas Bowl was over, Brian Kelly pretty much said it in as plain English as possible. We're not done shopping in the transfer portal. The second thing is that I don't know that corner is the biggest position of need right now. In fact, I know it's not. Safety is. But just because they're bringing this guy in doesn't mean they're not going to bring in other safeties. They're bringing in a tight end. Do they need another tight end? I think they probably do. But Trey'Dez Green in the bowl game, plus Bauer Sharp coming in, plus LaFleur coming in, I don't know that they can't live without another tight end, but they're looking for one. I wouldn't be surprised if not only are we not done with the transfer portal, but there are multiple more players coming in this class. You can just tell by the way they're shopping. I don't know if they're going to get these two kids, but they are not done.
It's been a shopping spree.
When you decide to commit resources, and we're going to do it. They do it very well when they decide to do it. Thanks to the folks here at Walk-Ons in Brewley. We always appreciate it. Come by and get your seasonal brews here. Great place to watch the game. Enjoy the good weather. Tomorrow we're at Doe's Eat Place. For Max and Jordan, I'm Charles Hanniger saying thank you. And good afternoon. Stay tuned for Hunt Palmer on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.